so far. Found them very insightful. Hopefully today can be as useful to you guys as well. Obviously, we're pinning it around sort of what me and Mark currently do with our analysis. Me today, I'm just going to go through sort of almost as you would have principles of play in the game, principles of analysis, and how you can start to build hopefully something, regardless of whether you've got the funding or the structure in place. Even the smallest amount of analysis will prove useful. So I just wanted to start off with a question of sort of why analyze, why would we look to analyze performance and that sort of thing. So I've got a short clip, just 2 minutes, just for us as coaches to have a look at, firstly, and just see if you can start to pick out different bits and bobs from this footage, and then we'll reconvene after. I've got a couple of questions on a subsequent slide that we'll see sort of if we can answer sort of in our heads as such. So I'll roll the clip.
Pallone all'indietro, tentato il sinistro da Mohamed, pallone deviato, Marco Sedano alla blocca. Altro nuovo ingresso, altro canterano del Barcellona, come Joselito, anche Marc Torra. A sinistra si va da Alex, all'indietro per Lozano che ha un destro alla dinamite, non lo prova, va ancora da Adolfo, poi Torra che sbaglia tutto, regalato il gol del vantaggio alla Francia. Seconda divisione francese e oggi ha segnato il gol ai 7 volte campioni d'Europa. Spagna 0, Francia 1. E adesso vediamo come cambia la partita. La Russia ieri si era fatta sorprendere dalla Polonia. Questa sera stiamo vedendo ancora più qualcosa di imprevedibile alla vigilia. Torra, Adolfo per Alex Siesano, ancora Torra, Adolfo ha preso fiducia, lo vedete anche nella pressione sul portatore di palla alla Francia. Lozano sbaglia l'imbucata con il pallone che arriva dalle parti di Samba Kebé, altro nuovo entrato della nazionale francese. In testa al campionato c'è il Kremlin di Setre, squadra che ha vinto il titolo nel 2015, 41 punti. Pensate, la squadra che lo scorso anno ha vinto il titolo, ovvero il Gang Gibson, è a meno 18. Vediamo cosa si inventa il Bufalo, calcia fortissimo, palla che colpisce il palo di sostegno della porta di Harun, che però...
Right, perfect. So, off the back of watching that footage, I've thrown those questions on screen. And if I was to ask those to the people in the room right now, I'd assume just from watching that 2-minute clip, most of us as coaches would be able to sort of pick out the majority of that information, if I asked it of you. But what I want to do next is layer on these questions. So if you just take a second to sort of digest those, and quickly you can start to see how, if we ask further questions and ask more about what we've just witnessed ourselves as coaches, we can quickly sort of struggle to come up with those answers because maybe we can't pay attention. And the point I'm trying to get across is that's not a fault within ourselves. That's a fault across humans. If I knock onto the next slide, so looking at that quote there, there's quite a few studies that have been in place that put sort of coaches recall at this 40-50% mark of they can recall after the game 40 to 50% of what they had witnessed, so goals, shots, who was where and when, key moments, that sort of thing. So then obviously the question isn't necessarily why would you analyze, it's why wouldn't we? If we can boost our level of recall to a level that's maybe 75 to 80%, obviously sitting at 40, 50%, we're doing ourselves a little bit of a disservice to an extent. And obviously that leaves us, when we do start to record this data, with a permanent record. So we're not necessarily we're not having to sort of record this data from memory. It's permanent if we store it in the correct way. So next slide is based on sort of the process. I've stripped this back to its basics, and you can see it kind of closely mirrors a coaching cycle. We've obviously, if we start with the match day, we have a match day, the game happens, the result happens, and subsequently we would look to analyse this. However we've decided is the best way to do that. Before our training session, and I've put this in sort of a dashed ring, because some of us might not have the means or the ability to analyze opposition and collect video. We're quite lucky with the stuff we do in the NFS, where we get sent the games on a weekly basis, so we've got video footage of plenty of futsal to go off for our opposition. That then can feed into the training session. Your analysis, your subsequent analysis from your match and your opposition, will feed into your this week's training session. We can analyze training to make sure we've had the returns that we were looking for. And then I've put this in a gold circle because this is the most important part. And the feedback loop between this training analysis and the next match day is where a lot of the times things can fall down. And if we can get this right, this sort of I don't know if you can see my mouse there, but this cycle just continues with itself, and without this feedback loop here, it sort of breaks down the whole thing, and there's no sort of continuity within the analysis we're doing. That's not to say it's pointless, but without this, you are going to limit the value inherently from what you can get out of your analysis. So moving on just slightly. Firstly, three parts really. If we break down analysis, we have the KPIs, key performance indicators, which we'll call PIs, and action variables, which are AVs. What's absolutely vital before we do any of this and look into any analysis of any kind is that if we're doing it ourselves as a coach, we understand what success is. Without that idea, we then can't structure what we need to analyze to almost feedback from the bottom up. So without that success and what that looks like, we can't collect the individual stats or footage or clips from the game. And then we can't feed them back into these performance indicators, which really are just a combination of visualizations, which Mark is going to go into a lot more detail of tomorrow. If I just highlight this here. So this is sort of a big part of what me and Mark do amongst these other three sections. So we take stats, plug them into a performance indicator, which helps us answer this question of, has success been achieved? And that's sort of the basis of all the analysis we do. That's the questions we have to ask to begin with to make sure that we're on the right track and we can help inform decisions going forward with the coaches. And then sort of lastly, after this slide, I've got a short sort of case study that we can go through, which is going to show you sort of how, if you wanted to, you could structure analysis over a season. So a lot of the times people will have this sort of misconception that analysis is expensive, and there is truth in that it costs time, and obviously time is valuable, and it can be spent on other sort of, especially within your coaching, it can be spent in other ways that we might feel is more appropriate. But hopefully, this slide here, you'll start to see. I've given some ideas of ways that are sort of cost effective in both senses of the word with regards to time and software and the costs associated with that. So it's very easy to take a phone. Everybody has one. Everybody's got a capable phone nowadays that records in 4K. Record your session. You can upload that footage to Hive. You can have your players on Hive who can review the footage. I've put in the top right corner there, you can ask your players to contribute. So an easy way I always look at this is every player goes, they watch back the match from the weekend, which you'd hope they were doing anyway, and just give me 2 times you thought you did well within the game, and one thing that the team as a whole could work on to get better. And if you've got 12 players in your matchday squad, all of a sudden that's 36 pieces of analysis that you potentially didn't have before. So it's not necessarily you as the coach's responsibility to pull all of that together, but you can coordinate that within your groups. There's obviously those with a budget, so maybe NFS, NFL, or some of the top tier book sides. Me and Mark, between us, have used simply just GoPro, Dartfish software like Coach Logic is a cost-effective version of something similar to Huddle. And if we start to use these pieces of software in conjunction with Excel sheets to record data and iMovie to clip our footage and Hive to store it, Slack to distribute it between players, so you can get sort of a conversation going around around different subjects, that proves very useful, and it's going to save you so much money in the long run compared to the more expensive sort of all-in-one pieces of software you can get your hands on. And then the final note I've got to make on this is using our facilities to an example, to our advantage, sorry. Most of us will be based in schools or on university campuses, and there's nothing stopping us necessarily, as long as we have permission from that facility, to borrow a changing room or a classroom for 20 minutes before training. And all of a sudden, you've got a 20-minute video meeting. You've already, the players have collated the analysis for you. And before your session even starts and before you get on court, you can go through the analysis from the last week. And I think the focus at the minute seems to be on how can we pull people in, how can we keep kids and adults in the game, and it's such an effective way, because these kids that might be sort of flitting between football and futsal, all of a sudden they're getting a level of analysis that a lot of children in professional football academies aren't getting. So what a great sell for development in that sense. We can offer something with a little bit of flexibility that a lot of grassroots clubs, football clubs, can't necessarily offer. So I think for me, that is something that is maybe overlooked currently. I'm not sure how many people do this, whether you're working with kids or adults, if you take on video meetings, but it's something that's massively valuable. And I've seen from just 15, 20-minute video meetings, so fair few players that almost a penny drops, because they're watching themselves back, and they're watching themselves sort of, they're watching their clips, they're watching the footage, they're seeing where they're going wrong, and we can coach them in that way instead in the video meeting. So after that, like I said, we've got this example case study. So what I'm going to do again now, because I appreciate I've rattled through a lot there, is I've got another clip of footage. So I'm going to play this footage, and then sort of I'm going to guide us through a top to bottom sort of how we might look at in a season, structuring our analysis as a whole, and then breaking it down individually. And then, like I say, once it's over, we'll zip through sort of designing what the analysis might look like for the following season.
Mediasce, Isenko. In chiusura Felipe, se possibile 1 contro 1, che diventano 2. Adesso Felipe alla fine Mediasce, bravissimo a chiudere, però non riesce ad allontanare. Rimessa Romania, 7:44 da giocare. La partita è completamente in equilibrio. Ucraina ha avuto la forza di recuperarla. Un po' di fortuna in occasione del 2-2, con quella deviazione che ha fatto la differenza. Rimatei, Ignat. Destinato il portiere di movimento, Rimatei. Ignat, c'è di Stoica lì a sinistra. Di Stoica passa la diagonale per far entrare Tonizza. Lui è destro, viene utilizzato a sinistra da portiere in movimento. Questo però lo obbliga, un scatto importante, si perde il possesso per entrare il portiere Tonizza. Giurba. Turma. Orizzontale, Giurba. Passare poi il diagonale. La risposta di Tonizza.
Okay, cool. So I've off the back of that, I'm going to focus, say, on the yellow side, and I've decided for futsal season 2021, if we ever get there, that our team is our KPI for the season is to win a league. So then I take a step down to the action variables. The easiest way for me to tell if we've won the league is to record our results and our points totals. So this is dead easy because most of this work is already done for us. So on a league website, sort of the full-time websites from the FA, we can easily see where we are in the table and that sort of thing. A performance indicator for us to compare against may be something like calculating the average points needed based on, say, the last 5 seasons. So we take the team who's finished first for the last 5 seasons, total the points, divide it by 5. Then we've got a target points total that if we are there at the end of the season, we know realistically we should be in with a chance of achieving our KPI, which is to win the league. So next step, let's sort of layer in, would be how do we win those games that are going to get us to that points total that we know we're in a shout of sort of winning the league. My KPI for a match day might be a scoreline plus minus of +2. So I'm always looking to outscore the opponents by 2 goals. That, in theory, well, that is factual. That if we achieve that on a match day, we'll have won the game, and that's going to help us towards our KPI of winning the league. So then that obviously feeds back down into this action variable start, so we can start structuring sort of the stats that we need for our players to analyze this performance and see how they are positively or negatively influencing the game. So start to think about kind of what you would like to collect with your players on a team basis that might help you maybe give you an idea of how far away you are from reaching your KPI that you have set out at the start of the season, whatever that might be. So if I use the laser, so this here, I'm hoping you can see that. So this is in yellow because this is called well, this is sort of an invention of mine. So what I use is this player rating. I call it. It's a weighted rating based on efficiency of each individual and whilst they're on the court. So they can't score points when they're off court. They can only score points based on the stats they put up whilst on court. I'll go into more of this towards the end. This again is a performance indicator, so this is similar to what Mark's going to present on tomorrow in terms of the packing metric. But this is just a single performance indicator that can help us present the data to support or inform our KPIs and whether we hit them or not. So then, how do we score these goals so that we are +2 by the end of the game? So now, as you can see, we can start to break it into sort of even more detail. Got goalkeeping KPIs. We've got KPIs for a fix, for our wing, for a pivot. These are all really basic examples I've just come up with. There's no right or wrong way to do this. You need to, like we say, as a coach, the KPIs have to come from the coach down. We need to know. Sorry, what's that? Bear with me 1 second. Sorry. So yeah, where was I? KPIs. They need to come from the coach down. The coaches need to identify what they want from each player, and this is a theoretical example. But if you're blessed with a definitive fix and definitive wingers and definitive pivots, then that's ideal because you can really narrow in the focus for them. And then this, if I just knock back one, so those KPIs all help feed into this player rating here. So this player rating, just to go into a little bit more detail, is based on I might lose a couple of people here, but the NFL. So the NFL has a statistic which is based around the efficiency of the quarterbacks. So my theory in this is these 5 players that make up your on court sort of quartet are in essence, I see them as 4 quarterbacks. So 4 different playmakers with varying skill sets that at any time need to be ready to read a situation, make the right decision, and affect the game in a positive way. And that's what my KPIs here that live within my player rating look to encapsulate. So that's just sort of an easy way to remove the noise of a database of loads of numbers. Because once you start collecting statistics, you quickly find that there's numbers everywhere, but there's sort of there's less ways of presenting that information easily. And I've got a quick picture on the very last slide of what I collect and how this influences the player rating. So again, we've come to the last slide. So, or there's a couple of slides after this, but we'll go back to this video again. So now, just have a minute or two whilst you're watching the footage, and really try and narrow down. Pick a team again and narrow down. Sort of if you've got means of taking notes, take notes. Who loses the ball? Who wins the ball? Who takes shots? Are they on target? Are they off target? Are they good quality shots? Who's making the passes that lead to chances? And that sort of thing now. So off the back of that, try and have a think for these players, but also your own players. What should their KPIs be? What statistics do I need to collect to
Felipe, senza possibile 1 contro 1 che diventano 2, adesso Felipe alla fine mi piace, bravissimo a chiudere, però non riesce ad allontanare, rimessa Romania, 7:44 da giocare, partita è completamente in equilibrio. Crane ha avuto la forza di recuperarla. Un po' di fortuna in occasione del 2-2 con una deviazione che ha fatto la differenza. Mattei. Destinato il portiere di movimento. Mattei. C'è un stoica lì a sinistra. Quindi stoica la diagonale per far entrare Tonizza. Lui a destra viene utilizzato a sinistra da portiere in movimento. Questo però lo obbliga uno scatto importante. Si perde il possesso per entrare il portiere Tonizza. Giurba.
So, just to round this off, and sort of to reiterate the importance of that feedback loop we identified at the start, I've just put these questions here on the last slide. I'll let you go through them yourselves. But we can start to see how we can take a subjective opinion of performance and reinforce that objectively, which is all analysis is trying to do, and it's all it should do in terms of supporting you to make decisions. It shouldn't make decisions for you necessarily. Coaches are important in that we've all got sort of this coach's eye that we rely on, and that's not very often is that wrong. But what this analysis will do is potentially help you to identify things that coach's eyes has missed as such. And then at the bottom, all I've done is sort of in the way you would plan, do and review your sessions. It's dead easy. Plan, how can I record this training session? Who can assist me in enumerating the session? Do I need the players involved? Have I got the luxury of another coach? Have I got the greater luxury of somebody dedicated to do that for me? And then the review is, instead of reviewing it subjectively, like we've mentioned above, can we start to objectively review training sessions and matches to reconcile the improvement from match days and training sessions? And then finally, again, don't forget to complete the loop. I think whilst we're still in sort of an amateur environment with the sport, hopefully with webinars like this and the previous ones that we've had this week, we can still look to sort of professionalize what we're doing as best as we can, so that we're ready for in the sort of preparation for the development of the game in the future. Just there, I've left a snippet of what necessarily my just one of the sort of, this is what forms my player rating. So this is what one of the things we do on a weekly basis, and what that looks like. This is the sort of thing that we'll track. But yeah, that's all for me. That's the end of the presentation. What I will say is, obviously, we might have some questions off the back of this. If anybody hasn't got the time now to ask that question, but they are interested in what sort of analysis they could be doing, but they don't know where to start, do feel free to reach out, especially whilst we've not got a lot on at the minute, especially I suppose with the news that we've just had with the NFS. If anybody does want that assistance, I'm more than happy to help in that way. But again, thank you for your time, and hopefully you can join back tomorrow, where Mark's going to take what we collect here and go into way more detail in how we apply that and really analyze a performance properly, as opposed to sort of the structure and how we collect the data that we collect and what we base that on. So yeah, thanks again.
Thanks a lot, Ben, for that. As I say, from personal perspective. The last couple of weeks have been really eye-opening from what you've really shown us off here. As I say, I know Mark will delve more into that tomorrow, so it'll give people even more of an idea of the depth you guys go into and what can really be achieved in futsal. Like you mentioned, I think it's a good period now with the 6 months ahead that potentially we won't have any games for coaches really to sort of get into this side of the game as well and really test themselves, learn new things and really help benefit the players moving forward ahead of next season. I'm sure everybody's got a lot of questions, so I'll open the floor now for anybody that's got any questions in the chat, or if you want to stick your hand up or just jump in.
I think we've got one down the bottom there in the chat. So on average, how long do you spend analysing the game post match? So what I try to do and what we both try to do between us is cover the match, potentially the opposition as well, and then also a little bit of training analysis if we can, and storing that somewhere for later if needs be. So realistically, I think we both probably watch the game back at least once. We may watch that again if we want to analyse the opposition instead of our own group of players. But really, if that sort of image I left you with on the last slide, that's just me watching that game back once. So hourly sort of time commitment is probably between maybe 2 and 3 hours a week, I would say. That obviously increases it the more you do. The one thing I will say is there are sort of time cost effective ways of picking stats out that maybe are easy to collect, and we can get caught up on trying to collect time consuming ways, especially when not a lot of us have had or have got that free time to collect all the data we want. Finding the easy stuff to collect and making the most out of that is often the best way forward, I believe.
Yeah. David's asked. He says that he gets obsessed with watching footage over and over again of his team and players, but also the opponents collectively and individually. There's so much analysis for one session. So where should they really focus? I know that's an important discussion, as I say, you guys have been having with us recently about that coach's input and really knowing where to focus your time. So, as I say, how sort of adding on to that question, how important is that dialogue between an analyst and a coach? But of course, if you don't have an analyst, how important it is knowing yourself what to look at there.
Yeah, sure. So I think if I dive onto David's point first, this is kind of where I think the easiest way to do that is to allow yourself a block of time a week, and then obviously there's a whole multitude of different bits and bobs you can pull into that within sort of the universe of analysis, as me and Mark would refer it to. But give yourself a block of time. Know based on the system you play, are you trying to react and stifle what the opposition are doing? Therefore, opposition analysis is more important, or are you trying to be the best at what you do? So focus on your own team, and maybe training analysis is the most important, because then the players you can rely on that you've delivered that message to, that they've got the best chance of performing on the day. Match analysis is very useful to have, but obviously all your match analysis is potentially in hindsight. So some of the best analysis you can do is of those training sessions to inform your selection at the weekend, and sort of you're going in there with the guys that are best suited to win you that game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that really alludes to what you were saying before about knowing what the KPIs are, the key performance indicators. So if you're playing with a pivot and you want to find him centrally in that certain game, then post game maybe you just focus your time on looking for that central passes that you've accomplished into the pivot, or if you're playing with a false pivot, using him down the line and really focusing on the times that your output in those key performance indicators. Then Ian Parks has asked, how much value do you place on these figures into selecting your team?
It's a good question. I don't think we should use them to select teams. I think all analysis is basically sort of an integrated support function as such of the coaching process. It's there to sort of give an insight that you may not have considered before. So I don't think anyone should rush in and start collecting stats and then say, "Oh, you didn't do this last week, and I've recorded the stats since, so you're not playing this week," or dropping players left, right, and centre because they don't do well on sort of statistically, because there's a lot that goes on beyond what we collect in the limited time we have that potentially goes unnoticed. And I'm sure you know who those players are within your group who, if you did pull them out, you would suffer as a consequence, regardless of whether they score highly on sort of a stat sheet or not.
Perfect. Has anybody got any further questions? Class. So as I say, I know it's this is basically part one of a two-part series, and I know Ben and Mark have worked together quite a long time now, and they've done some really good work for those guys that have seen them on the GFC and through some stuff that they post on Twitter as well. So Mark tomorrow will delve more into the depth of those key numbers and how those numbers come out. It'll show a few more case studies as well. And I think it's important that for those guys that really watch today, that you sort of understand it and then head in tomorrow. And I think that'll probably round it off. But thanks a lot, Ben, for your time as they putting it together. I know that the hard work that you put in behind the scenes. If there's a couple of words that you wanted to round it up with and say what the key points for the coaches to take away from sort of your presentation, what do you reckon there would be?
I suppose is ensure that any analysis you do informs what you're doing. Don't let it make decisions for you. Any analysis you can do is valuable because, like we saw at the start, the coaches' recall in general is pretty poor. And like I said, that's a human problem. That's not necessarily an individual problem. That's something we all suffer from. So there's that, and obviously at the minute, I think in futsal, analysis is really at sort of the beginning of what we can do with it, and a lot of what is happening is sort of piggybacked from, say, football or other close sports. So more ideas the better. And like I say, if we can get these discussions going, and if anybody wants to drop me a line on email or over Twitter or whatever, I'm more than happy to have that conversation and try and move things forward. So I think that's what we need to get to a point where we've got our own sort of analysis methods within the sport.
Yeah, great. Honestly, as I say, like we've got 6 months to kill now. So I think it's really important that we sort of take it as a positive when we try and learn new things and really test ourselves. But also put a bit of heinous and ownership on the players as you alluded to before, to really help us out because we're not full time, and I think that'll only help them benefit themselves as well moving forward. As I say, thanks a lot. We'll be back tomorrow night, same time, where Mark will pick up and sort of round this discussion off. So I hope to see everybody back here. But appreciate everybody coming. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Cheers.